Richard Tice is now banging on about a referendum on net zero immigration. That's another thing that you could theoretically use to divide the population, obscure the nuances, make people base their opinions on political policy about how they voted on in a referendum with no policy background behind it or clear plan about how it would be implemented. But you can just say, well, this is a betrayal of the referendum, regardless of what the referendum said.
I've gone to Peter Hitchens' Wikipedia page and the European Union bit. Hitchens is critical of the European Union and argued for many years before Brexit that Britain would be better off outside. In 2017, he endorsed the Flexit model, which was the most sensible and moderate way to leave the EU while remaining in the European Economic Area. He preserved the economic benefits, blah, blah, blah. However, he did not vote in the 2016 EU referendum because he's critical of referendums.
I mean, probably good to be critical of that referendum because it was such a bull's up, because it was just yes, no, no plan.
And as he pointed out, he forced the parliament that hated the idea to have to do the thing. That's sort of the problem. To try and mix up representative democracy and direct democracy just is going to lead to that kind of dissonance.
What's interesting as well is that, speaking of referenda, I think Peter Hitchens' criticisms of referenda, especially in the case of Brexit, very well founded. You don't really have a proper plan to go with it. You just have do you want the thing, yes or no? And it creates a constitutional crisis, it creates a political crisis, and it creates societal divisions and also political opportunism, which has been seized upon by people on the right wing, Nigel Farage and Richard Tice and Reform UK and the Brexit Party. Even people who stood for UKIP, like Sargon of Akkad and Count Dankula, they also definitely managed to grift off of the whole divisions that were created by the Brexit referendum, the political hurt that was created by this fundamental division over a Boolean issue. And the political opportunists who seize on this know that this is powerful. You see, remember the last however many years Nigel Farage has been banging on his GB News show about this idea of a referendum on net zero? That's because he wants to do the same thing. Rather than having a complex and drawn out and kind of protracted political process over how we approach net zero, the bargaining in the background, the political posturing over it by different political parties trying to get elected under a sclerotic but at the very least checked and balanced political system, that's not good for a demagogue. That's not good for an iconoclast having to get caught up in what is essentially paperwork, which is how policy again can go through this and usually come out a little bit more nuanced at the end of it. And so rather than having that drawn out conversation, they want to go, okay, just have another referendum. Have another referendum, we'll draw some dividing lines, we'll divide society, we'll create societal disunity and societal entropy, and we will be the strong man who will capitalise on this disunity and this entropy that is created by having this referendum, yes or no on net zero. Because then, of course, that doesn't have any precepts behind it. Is a pro-carbon policy or an anti-climate change policy, are these net zero or not? Who knows? Because all that does is change the goal about when you're supposed to have net zero carbon emissions. Every single policy will still have a bunch of chicanery in the foreground or in the background about whether it has any societal utility. But the anti-net zero people, they will say, well, we voted for anti-net zero in this referendum that Richard Tice wanted or Farage wanted. And so you can't do this thing that minimises the impact of fossil fuels because that's a net zero policy, even though net zero is the policy goal of when you receive net zero carbon. It doesn't say anything about how you reach it or what the rest of our energy market looks like. And they're trying it yet again.
They would make it the most extreme version, like you say. Anything that didn't use oil or coal would be seen as net zero and woke, and therefore would be made illegal because everyone voted for the strongest form of net zexit. I don't know what the fuck it would be called. And talking of his demagoguery and not wanting to get boiled in the actual business of governing, it's been, I think, 12 days since the Maze fire that happened in Clacton, his constituency, and he tweeted out, "Oh, I'll be there soon in a couple of days." Still hasn't been there.
Nope. Exactly. Again, 100%. He's just absolutely a demagogue. And the thing is, they're trying to do this referendum thing again, right? They lost on the net zero referendum idea because nobody cared. No. But by nobody cared, what I actually mean is people in this country really do support pro-climate legislation. Yeah. We are one of the greenest countries in Europe in terms of public opinion on whether we support policies to mitigate the effects of climate change. Further than France on this, like we're further than the French right, our Conservative Party are in the same position as the French left. Our Conservative Party are in the same position as the Democratic Party in America. Like in the Western world broadly, we are an incredibly pro-climate party. We like to see policies that deal with the impact of climate change. We really, really do. And every poll showed that even Reform UK diehard voters didn't care about their net zero grift.
They tried to make it a wedge issue and then discovered that there weren't any people on the other side of the wedge, so they weren't dividing. There's no one to divide there, you know.
So they've realised their mistake. Now you see what Richard Tice is banging on about now. Richard Tice is now banging on about a referendum on net zero immigration. population. That's another thing that you could
Hey.
theoretically use to divide the population, obscure the nuances, make people base their opinions on political policy about how they voted on in a referendum with no real policy background behind it or clear plan about how it would be implemented. But you can just say, well, this is a betrayal of the referendum, regardless of what the referendum said about this thing. Again, are we going to give visas to students to try and come bring their family here, even though they'll be gone in 3 years? No, because it will increase net migration. We can't have that. That would break the rules of the referendum, or that would undermine the spirit of the referendum, because that's what people talk about with Brexit. They never talk about what was in the referendum because it was just in or out, but they have got their own idea that they can imprint about what the spirit of the referendum was, and that, regardless of what their disparate opinions are, they can all galvanise themselves behind the true cause of seeing through the result of the referendum, which is how the Brexit Party drew together like disaffected northern communities and posh people in the south, because they had different ideas of what Brexit meant, but they both knew that they were on the right side of this referendum argument, regardless of the utility. And they'll do the same with net zero and will have the same problem, and they will exploit the same societal divisions, which is how demagogues work.
Exactly, yeah, and it's very useful for fascists because, like you say, people can imprint what they like onto it, which is how a fascist kind of coalition builds. And secondly, they can use the will of the people argument. Everything I personally want, my interpretation of this event, if you disagree with that in any way, you disagree with all of these people, and you're against the will of the people, you're on the outside, I can punish you for that.
Exactly. It's exactly the way in which the people on the right use the term woke as newspeak. Not newspeak is in the term that people are saying new things. That's not what newspeak is, for people who don't know in chat. Newspeak is a specific thing that describes the removal of language to be able to discuss things in totality. You reduce things down to simple language that obscures all the different bits and pieces. But if you know that you're on the anti-woke side of the argument, regardless of how you got there, oh, well, transgenderism made me anti-woke, or high taxes made me anti-woke, or immigration made me anti-woke, or climate change policy made me anti-woke. As long as then you can market anti-wokeness as your opposition to it, they can then sell you on all of those other policy prescriptions on the grounds that it is anti-woke, rather than whether or not you think that high taxes are good, or you think that immigration is bad or not. Because at the end of the day, you have bought into being anti-woke as a political position because you thought that transgenderism has gone too far. Now you support lower taxes. Now you support the Conservative Party. Look at Graham Linehan. Anti-woke has been this surrogate for loads of movements to bring them together, and it's exactly how the referendums are there to create this newspeak atmosphere where everything is about the result of the referendum rather than the myriad complex political issues that plague the country.
Very true.
Hey there, if you enjoyed the video, make sure that you like and leave a comment. That helps the video out in the algorithm. If you subscribe and ring the bell, it'll let you know when I go live. I stream every day on YouTube and Twitch. You can also follow all of my socials down in the description. And if you want to support me in a more financial manner, there's a join button for membership to just 99p to be a member on YouTube, as well as a Patreon, and there's some merch there as well. And hopefully I'll catch you on the next video. Take care.